In this video, I'll be talking about how to be a good musical entertainer. Hey, it's Paul Toby from jazzmental.com. I got a question recently from Henk-Jan in YouTube. He asks, can you make a video about entertaining the audience, and is there a general rule for a set list? So I'm not just specifically speaking about jazz gigs, but pretty much any gig. And in this video, I'm going to share with you and Henk-Jan 5 solid fundamentals that you absolutely need to know in order to entertain the audience. It's kind of the whole point of music, is to make it fun and entertaining for the audience. Obviously, you want to play great music, that's part of it, but there are 5 other things that you absolutely need to know in order to make it a memorable evening for your audience. We're going to get started right now. Okay, so today we're talking about how to be a good musical entertainer. And I've been entertaining audiences for many years, but it wasn't until I reached an age where I was thinking, hey, how do I up my game a little? I started taking some training courses, public speaking courses, and I learned a lot of tricks that can really be helpful to you. So please pay attention to the 5 things I've got in this video. Each one of them are important and absolutely fundamental to you becoming a great entertainer. Number 1, try to remember this. It's not about you. It's about the audience. If you make the audience more engaged in the process, then they will learn to love your performances. They just want to be in the game. They don't want to just sit there and listen. And I've learned that if you keep the audience enrolled and engaged, they have a lot more fun. And they also buy a lot more CDs because you become memorable. And once you hit the level of memorability, then your audiences will start to grow. So try to remember, it's not about you. I know it's tough to think about it that way. Yes, they came to see you play. Yes, it's about your music. Yes, but it's not really about you per se. It's about them enjoying themselves. So that's fundamental number 1. Let's move on to number 2. When putting a set list together, and I think this speaks directly to Henk-Jan's question in YouTube when he asks, how do you put a set list together? And my answer is, play some music they know first. Now, they don't necessarily have to love it, and you have no idea whether they do or not. All you got to do, though, is play something they know. And when you start with that, and I usually think 2, 3, sometimes even 4 tunes that they know and recognize before you play something that they potentially don't recognize, like your own music. And I know as a jazz artist, it's always important to lay new music on them, new compositions and arrangements and things like that. That's kind of the whole point. But at the end of the day, if they don't recognize it, then they lose interest very quickly. They have music memory, whether you believe that or not, and they recognize things that they recognize, and it makes it a lot more interesting for them when you can start with what they like and know versus what you like and know. You have to be careful not to just throw music at them that they don't understand and don't know, especially in jazz. Okay, let's move on to number 3. Don't start with just music. And I know that makes very little sense to most musicians. Hey, let's just hit the bandstand, let's just start playing. I never do that. In fact, the first thing I do is I engage the audience by asking them a couple of questions. Now, the best enrolling and engaging question you can ask is a question that starts with 4 words. How many of you? So essentially what you're doing is you're taking a poll, and it could really be about anything. It just has to be somewhat relative to the situation. So let's say I'm playing a jazz club. I hit the bandstand, the band sits down. The last thing you want to do is introduce the band members. Do that at the end if you absolutely need to. Quite frankly, I don't think the audience cares too much about that. What they care about is stuff they care about. So let's start with them. So I say, how many of you are local and how many of you come from, not from here, from another state or another city or whatever? And you'll see a show of hands and you say thank you and then ask another question. How many of you are actually jazz lovers? And you might get a couple of hands. Thank you. And you might even ask a third question. It's like, how many of you, your husbands dragged you here? whatever you do, just try to poll the audience, because as soon as they put their hand up, you can guarantee that they are 100% enrolled and engaged from the very first second. And then, of course, you can move on from there. You can do an introduction, tell them a little bit about yourself. That's fine. I would personally ask permission to do that. For example, is it okay if I tell you a little bit about myself? And the audience goes, yeah, sure, go ahead, because they've already learned to respond to what you're saying. By the way, that whole thing, it's called suggestology. I've actually written a book about it. You might want to look that up on the internet. It's called Suggestology by Paul Toby. It's basically how to activate the audience's natural will to learn and pay attention. Okay, so remember, continuously ask the audience questions. For example, at the end of a tune, you could say, how many of you like that one? All right, thank you. How many of you would like me to play something else entirely that's completely different than that? And you get the other half of the audience. So it's really about asking questions, make it timely, and just get used to that conversation with the audience. Okay, let's move on to number 4. And this is really cornerstone to the entire enjoyment level of the audience. And number 4 is take requests. Now, I know that you sometimes get into trouble. I know I've gotten myself into trouble with requests, because you might get a couple of them and you don't know them and you feel a little bit embarrassed because, quite frankly, as a musician, you're not a jukebox. You can't know and remember everything. And you might get a request that's completely outside of your realm of music. For example, if you're playing a jazz gig and somebody requests a popular music piece, which has happened to me many times, and fortunately I can turn them into jazz if I need to. For example, I remember getting a request from my wife of 27 years. Before I met her in a jazz club, and she came to the piano and asked me to play some Whitney Houston. So yeah, obviously she's not a jazz fan. She is now, but at that time, that's what she wanted to hear. So I played Saving All My Love for You. No big deal. I've been playing, cocktail piano for many years. But I, obviously want to be a jazz player, and that was a jazz gig. So I turned it into jazz, and the bass player was able to follow me and we got through it. No problem. Take requests. Now, here's the thing about requests. What you should have is some kind of library of lead sheets where you can make reference to. For example, I have a master list of all of the songs that are in the various real books. And there might be like 10 of them, like Real Book 1, Real Book 2, New Real 1, New Real 2, Colorado, Jazz Fake. There's all these fake books that have a myriad of songs in them. You can pretty much bet that whatever they're requesting, 90% of them, especially if you're playing a jazz gig, will be found in those books. And that's good. So take requests, play what they want, and then you can say, hey, I gave you what you want. Is it okay if I play my latest composition? What are they going to say? No? I mean, this is really the concept of entertainment. It's like, give the audience what they want and then transition them into what you want, and open their ears, open their eyes, open, their thoughts to new ideas and new music. And that will take you a long way. Okay, so make sure you take requests. Number 5, and this is the last one I want to talk about. You really want to tell stories. The best stories for gigs are road stories. Let me give you an example. So once I did a tour in Amsterdam, The Hague, and a few other cities in that part of the world, and I had a drummer with me. His name was Terry Clark. And Terry Clark was actually voted in Downbeat magazine as one of the top 5 jazz drummers in the entire world. So he obviously had a lot more experience than I did. I also had a bass player named Jim Vivian. But anyway, he had a lot of road experience. He would take point at the airport, and when we landed, he'd suss things out and whatever. Anyway, when we got to Amsterdam, he basically said, hey, I'm going to take you guys out, and we are going to do every single nightclub, coffee bar, and, anything in the red light district that I did with Oscar Peterson many years ago. Let's just go do the same things we did with Oscar. That sounds like fun. I'm a big fan of Oscar Peterson. He's gone now, but obviously a legend in the music business and as a piano player. Anyway, so we went and did that. And of course, we ended up at some coffee bars where they don't actually serve coffee. In fact, they bring you a menu and you order some junk off the list and they bring it to you. And quite frankly, I don't remember much of the evening after the first coffee bar. In fact, I had to play and perform the next day, and I was quite worried all night long that I wouldn't actually be able to play a single note. Fortunately for me, it wore off. I'm just telling you this to let you know that the audience is going to love stories like that versus, and the name of our next tune is Straight Note Chaser, it's in F, and it features the trumpet player. Like, nobody really cares about that. What they care about is that you've got some experience, some story, some place in the world that they've never been to, some road story where your car broke down, anything that they can picture in their mind and relate to. Because quite frankly, they can't relate to a lot of the jazz that you're playing anyway, even though they profess to. What they really want is to be involved, enrolled, and engaged. So thank you, Henk-Jan, for the question. I hope that answers it. And the stuff about the set list, like I said, just play something that they know to start, and then whatever else you want to play after that is good. Just go back and forth between the two. I hope this was valuable for you. If you have any questions or comments about what I'm talking about, please write them in the comments below, and I'll see you in another video. Thanks for your time. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're making 5 videos a week, just like this one, on various aspects of music and the music business. So I'd really appreciate it if you could come back and join me another time. Take care.